The fifth cement truck didn't just rattle my windows, it rattled a century of family history. I watched hairline fractures spider across the oak rail, my great-grandfather planed by hand, while our new HOA president, Victoria Kensington Hale, sipped coffee behind her picture window like a queen enjoying the siege. She thought I'd break, pay the fines, sign the permit. Let her pour a slab over my past and call it progress. I'm Ethan Waverly, retired Army Corps engineer, stubborn by blood and training. Rage would have been easy. Calculations were better. Loads, timelines, motive. The money trail that tied those mixers to her private company. She wanted my bridge condemned before my daughter's wedding, and she almost got it until the plan changed. Mine, not hers. Because bridges don't just carry cars, they carry promises. And if you threaten what carries my family home, I'll turn your own rules into the trap you never see coming. Before we dive in, drop your city and your local time in the comments. 3 months before that first cement truck thundered across my land, life was simple, peaceful even. My mornings began with the sound of Willow Creek whispering beneath the old bridge, oak beams darkened by 100 seasons, polished by generations of footsteps. My great-grandfather built it with nothing but hand tools and grit in 1923, carving every joint like a signature. My father taught me to fish from that railing. I carried my wife Linda across it on our wedding day. To outsiders, it was just a bridge. To us, it was the spine of the family. Then the subdivision came, shiny new houses sprouting like weeds around my 40 acres. With them came the HOA wrapped in friendly flyers promising community standards and shared values. You learn quick that those phrases translate to, "You'll do what we say." For months I stayed out of their way. Paid no dues, attended no meetings. My bridge wasn't part of their jurisdiction. Or so I thought. The first letter came in a white envelope stamped with gold trim, Notice of Non-Compliance. It claimed my bridge was a public safety hazard and structurally incompatible with modern load requirements. The signature at the bottom, Victoria Kensington Hale, HOA president, looked like it belonged on a corporate merger, not a neighborhood memo. I called the number on the letter and introduced myself politely. She didn't bother returning the courtesy. "Mr. Waverly," she said, in that voice, polished by years of depositions, "your wooden bridge doesn't meet community aesthetic standards. You'll need to replace it with reinforced concrete. It's private property," I replied. "Built before your subdivision even existed." "Progress," she countered, "waits for no one." That was the first time I realized she wasn't just ambitious, she was hunting something. Developers like her don't move to quiet towns for fresh air. They move for land. Weeks passed. Then the truck started. Not one or two convoys of 30-ton cement mixers rumbling down the narrow road that led straight to my bridge. Each driver said the same line, "HOA-approved route, sir." They might as well have been tanks rolling through enemy territory. Diesel fumes filled the valley. The bridge groaned under the weight, its timbers crying like wounded soldiers. The day I confronted Victoria in person, she arrived like she was attending a board meeting. White blazer, pearl earrings, perfume, thick enough to mask the stench of corruption. She didn't even look at the bridge, just handed me a folder. "Safety inspection results," she announced. "This structure poses a liability risk to the entire community." "Community," I said. "You mean your investors?" She smiled thinly. "Replace it voluntarily, or we'll proceed with enforcement." "I've built bridges that held tanks," I told her quietly. "Yours won't hold water." For a moment the smile faltered. Then she turned on her heel and left heels clicking like a countdown clock. Over the next few weeks, the harassment escalated. Anonymous complaints to the county. Photos of my bridge posted on the HOA's Facebook page with captions like, "Unsafe relic endangers our children." Neighbors who used to wave began crossing the street. The pressure campaign was classic corporate warfare: discredit, isolate, and squeeze until the target breaks. But I wasn't some retiree who could be bullied into compliance. 20 years in the Army Corps of Engineers teaches you a few things: how to identify weak points, how to plan counteroffensives, and most importantly, how to wait. Then came the wedding. My daughter Emily wanted to be married on the same lawn where her grandparents once celebrated their golden anniversary. The weather was perfect. Blue skies, breeze, carrying the scent of honeysuckle and roses. We set up tables by the creek, strung lights across the bridge. For a few precious hours it felt like the world had forgotten about HOA bylaws and legal threats. Until the rumble started. At first it sounded like distant thunder. Then the ground began to vibrate. Guests turned toward the road just in time to see a cement mixer the size of a small house barreling toward the bridge. My stomach dropped. "Please tell me that's not one of hers," I muttered. It was. And not just one, 5 more followed, each time to arrive minutes apart. The first truck hit the bridge like a battering ram. The oak beams flexed, groaned. Glasses rattled on the reception tables. Someone screamed. My mother, 86 years old, froze halfway across the span, clutching her walker as the bridge swayed beneath her. I sprinted forward and caught her arm, guiding her back just as another truck roared past, horn blaring. The photographer kept filming, instinct maybe, but that footage would later become Exhibit A. The bridge held barely, but the damage was done. Guests fled, the wedding ruined. And from across the creek through her massive kitchen window, Victoria stood watching, coffee mug raised in a silent toast. That night I sat on the railing under a cold moon, staring at the cracks spreading through the wood. Rage burned hot, but beneath it was clarity. This wasn't random harassment. It was calculated demolition. She wanted the bridge condemned so she could file an emergency removal order and open access for whatever luxury development she was planning downstream. I traced the grain of the oak with my hand, feeling the marks left by my great-grandfather's plane. The air smelled of diesel and river water and betrayal. In the core, we had a saying: every structure tells you how it's dying if you know how to listen. That night, the bridge wasn't dying, it was whispering a plan. Victoria had the trucks, the lawyers, the connections. I had something better: time, and a century's worth of family stubbornness carved into every beam of that bridge. By dawn, the calculations had begun. Load ratings, camera placements, legal timelines. The bridge would survive, but not just structurally. It would outlast her empire. She'd turn my family's history into a battlefield. Fine. I'd fought worse wars. This one I intended to win. The next morning, the sun rose over Willow Creek like nothing had happened, except for the smell of diesel that still hung thick in the air. The bridge looked tired, splintered like a soldier after too many tours. I could see stress fractures running along the lower beams, marks of a deliberate assault disguised as traffic. My daughter Emily stopped by before leaving for her honeymoon. She tried to smile, said it wasn't my fault, but her voice trembled. Her perfect day had been hijacked by a woman with a clipboard and a god complex. By noon, a county inspector pulled into my driveway in a city-issued truck. A man in a neon vest stepped out holding a clipboard that looked suspiciously familiar. "Mr. Waverly, we've received a complaint from your HOA regarding unsafe infrastructure. I'm here to perform an emergency safety evaluation." "Let me guess," I said, crossing my arms. "Sent by Victoria Hale." He hesitated. "Well, she did mention she's the HOA president." I watched him glance nervously at the bridge like it might explode under his boots. After a 10-minute inspection that consisted mostly of taking photos from the same angle, he cleared his throat. "Sir, I'll be honest. It doesn't look good. The structure's compromised. You'll need to remove it within 30 days. I could practically hear Victoria's heels clicking in triumph 3 blocks away. That night I called an old friend, Jim Patterson, a local attorney who'd served with me back when we were both young and invincible. "Jim, I need help," I said. "HOA's trying to condemn my bridge." He chuckled softly. "Let me guess, Victoria Hale. Yeah, her name's come up before. She's got a reputation, uses HOA bylaws like weapons. Send me everything." By morning, Jim had already found her fingerprints all over the county permit office. Her brother-in-law worked as a building inspector, the same one who'd issued my emergency evaluation. It was a neat little circle of corruption: file a complaint, inspect it yourself, then sell the replacement contract through your own construction firm. But I wasn't about to play defense. I knew how to go on the offensive. Step 1 was evidence. I set up 4 motion-activated cameras along the bridge, hidden in birdhouses under the railing, even in the oak tree that leaned over the creek. Step 2 was documentation. Every truck that crossed my property, I recorded the date, time, weight, and plate number. The first week, 7 trucks. The second, 12. By the third week, it had become an industrial parade: cement mixers, gravel haulers, and even one flatbed carrying rebar. All of them using my bridge, all HOA approved. Each crossing sounded like artillery fire, the oak beams groaning under tons of concrete. I could see the toll it was taking: splinters along the joints, bolts shifting by fractions of an inch. But I also noticed something else. The trucks always arrived in pairs, 30 minutes apart, like clockwork. Someone was scheduling them. I didn't have to dig far to find out who. A quick online search led me to a company called Hale Construction Group. Listed CEO Victoria Kensington Hale. That's when anger turned into purpose. 3 days later, I filed an emergency restraining order against further truck access. Jim helped me draft the claim with photographic evidence, time-stamped footage, and structural assessments from an independent engineer. By some miracle, or maybe divine irony, the county judge approved the injunction. For 72 hours, my land was silent again. Then, the retaliation started. Anonymous flyers appeared on mailboxes, accusing me of endangering community safety. HOA social media posts warned residents to avoid the hazardous area near my property. I woke up one morning to find a bright orange sign nailed to my mailbox, condemned by order of the OA. Linda, my wife, tried to ignore it, but I saw how she flinched when neighbors crossed the street instead of waving. The campaign wasn't just about land, it was about humiliation. That weekend, I attended the HOA meeting at the community hall, the first time I'd set foot there since they'd formed. The room smelled like burnt coffee and cheap perfume. About 50 residents sat in folding chairs, their faces tight with unease. Victoria stood at the front, flanked by her board members, 3 men who looked more like investors than neighbors. She smiled the way a cat does before it plays with a trapped bird. "Mr. Waverly," she began, pretending politeness, "we're here to discuss your bridge's safety hazard. The community deserves transparency." Transparency. I held up my tablet and played one of the videos from my trail cameras, 6 cement trucks crossing in one day. "Here's transparency. Your trucks, your company name, your drivers." Gasps rippled through the crowd. Her smile didn't break, but her eyes narrowed. "You're misinformed. Hale Construction serves multiple projects in the region." "Sure," I said, "all conveniently routed across my private property." She tried to pivot, launching into a speech about public safety and liability exposure. But then a woman from the back of the room, a mother with 2 young kids, stood up. "Wait, are you saying those trucks were HOA approved? We pay for that bridge's repairs." Victoria's voice sharpened. "Ma'am, please sit down. These matters are complex," the crowd murmured. I could see the first cracks in her control. After the meeting, Jim called me. "You did good," he said. "Keep your cameras rolling. We're building a case." That night, I sat by the bridge again, notebook in hand, calculating. The moonlight shimmered on the creek like silver wiring. I traced the damage lines with my flashlight, following them like veins through the wood. Then something caught my eye, a small brass tag embedded near the base of the beam. I brushed off the dirt and realized it wasn't just decorative. It was stamped with a date, 1923, Willow Creek Foundry. An idea began forming. If I could trace the bridge's original construction, maybe I could prove it had historic value. That would take it out of the HOA's jurisdiction completely. The next morning, I drove to the county archives, a dusty room full of forgotten ledgers and filing cabinets that hadn't been opened in decades. An elderly clerk named Mrs. Henderson greeted me with a smile that hadn't aged a day since my grandfather's time. "Looking for old survey records?" she asked. "Yes," I said. "Specifically from 1923, anything related to the Waverly property or the Willow Creek Bridge." She disappeared into the back room and returned with a cracked leather binder and a rolled-up map that smelled like old rain and ink. "Be careful," she said softly. "These are the originals." When I unrolled the map, my heart nearly stopped. There it was, hand-drawn borders showing that Willow Creek and the bridge itself were part of my family's original homestead, predating any subdivision or HOA covenant by nearly a century. In the margins, a note written in fading ink, perpetual right of passage granted to the Waverly family and their descendants. Grandfathered rights, unbreakable by modern bylaws. For the first time in months, I smiled. Victoria thought she was building a case. What she didn't know was that I'd just found the foundation that would bury hers. The discovery of that 1923 survey changed everything. I drove home with the map laid across the passenger seat like sacred scripture, afraid the brittle parchment might disintegrate if I breathed too hard. Each curve of ink felt like my great-grandfather reaching through time, whispering, "Don't let them take it." When I walked into the house, Linda looked up from her cup of tea. "You found something, didn't you?" "More than something," I said, unrolling the map across the dining table. "Proof." She leaned closer, tracing the faint handwriting that declared the bridge a perpetual right of passage. Her eyes widened. "So they can't touch it?" "Not legally," I said. But legality never stopped people like Victoria. We both knew what that meant. She'd fight dirtier now. That evening, Jim came over, sleeves rolled up and reading glasses sliding down his nose. He studied the document like a general reviewing a battle plan. "This is gold," he murmured. "If this was recorded properly, it predates the HOA by almost 60 years. You're dealing with grandfather rights, the holy grail of property law. We can weaponize this." "I don't want a war," I said quietly. "I want peace." He gave a wry smile. "Sometimes peace requires a strategic offensive." By the next morning, the plan was in motion. Jim filed a formal request for historical preservation under state heritage law. We sent certified copies of the survey and bridge photographs to the Department of Cultural Resources. Meanwhile, I called Dr. Amanda Rodriguez, a civil engineering professor from State University who specialized in historical structures. When she arrived 2 days later, she stepped out of her SUV like a woman on a mission khaki vest, clipboard, and eyes sharp enough to cut through bureaucracy. "I read your email," she said, shaking my hand. "Let's see what kind of masterpiece your ancestors left us." For 3 hours, she examined every beam, every joint. She tapped the oak with a small mallet, listened to the resonant scribbled notes, attached sensors. Finally, she turned to me with an incredulous grin. "Mr. Waverly, this bridge isn't just stable, it's extraordinary. The joinery is flawless. These compression joints could survive another century if maintained properly." "Tell that to my HOA president," I muttered. "Oh, I will," she replied. In a report with my name and 40 years of credentials at the top, it felt like the tide was finally turning until I opened my laptop that night. Someone had tagged me in a neighborhood Facebook post. The headline read, "Local veteran endangers families with unsafe bridge." The photo was my property zoomed in to show cracks exaggerated by shadow. The caption accused me of endangering children and refusing modernization. Within hours, dozens of comments appeared. "He's crazy. Typical old man who can't accept progress. Someone should report him." I didn't need to guess who started it. The tone was pure Victoria, polished, manipulative, dripping with fake concern. Linda placed a hand on my shoulder. "Don't read the comments. You'll just get angry." "I'm not angry," I said. "I'm taking notes." The next morning, we discovered the HOA had sent letters to all residents, warning them not to use the unsafe crossing at Waverly Creek. They even installed bright orange barricades at both ends of the road, leading to my bridge complete with reflective tape and HOA property "Do Not Enter" signs. The irony: the bridge was still structurally sound while her lies were beginning to crack. Jim called that afternoon. "Marcus, we need to escalate." "Ethan," I corrected him. "It's Ethan now. Marcus is the guy in their stories." He chuckled. "Fine, Ethan." I spoke with a journalist friend at the County Ledger. She's been covering HOA corruption cases. If we play this right, we can control the narrative before Victoria buries us in hers. It was risky. Public exposure meant open war, but I agreed. The reporter, Mrs. Patterson, came by the following evening, notebook in hand. She was retired, sharp-tongued, and smelled faintly of peppermint and ink. "I've seen a dozen of these HOA tyrants," she said, scribbling as I explained. "But few as bold as your Miss Hale. She's not just power-hungry, she's profit-driven. I'll need documentation, names, and dates." "Oh, I have plenty of those," I said, pointing to a filing cabinet stuffed with labeled folders. She looked impressed. "Good. Paper trails sink empires." 2 days later, the Ledger published a small piece titled "Historic Bridge Faces, HOA Battle." It was objective, but enough to make waves. Local talk radio picked it up. Neighbors began whispering that maybe I wasn't the villain after all. That's when Victoria made her next move. Monday morning, a county truck pulled into my driveway again. Same inspector, same nervous smile. "Mr. Waverly, there's been a new complaint. Says your bridge has deteriorated further and poses immediate danger." "Really?" I asked. "Mind if I record this inspection?" He blinked. I guess not." The moment he stepped onto the bridge, I flipped on my phone's camera. "Just curious," I said casually. "Did Miss Hale contact you directly?" His hesitation was answer enough. "Look, sir, I'm just following orders." "Who's he?" sighed. HOA president called it in personally. Said the county would be liable if we didn't act fast. I thanked him, shook his hand, and sent the video straight to Jim. By the end of the week, we filed a motion alleging harassment, conflict of interest, and abuse of process. Jim attached everything: drone footage of trucks, witness statements, photos, even Dr. Rodriguez's preliminary report. The packet was thick enough to choke a printer. But Victoria wasn't finished. Late Thursday night, I heard a vehicle idling near the creek. I grabbed a flashlight and crept through the darkness. 2 figures stood at the bridge, one with a toolbox, the other holding a drill. My motion lights flickered on just as the first man bent down to loosen a bolt. "Hey!" I shouted. They froze like deer. One of them bolted for the truck, while the other dropped the drill and stumbled after him. The license plate glinted in the beam of my flashlight, long enough for the camera to capture it. It belonged to Hale Construction Group. The following morning, I watched the playback. They'd been tampering with the bridge, loosening supports, drilling into beams, probably trying to make the damage appear natural. That was my final proof. I called Jim. They tried to sabotage it. He exhaled sharply. "Perfect. Don't touch a thing. Let the evidence sit. Should I call the sheriff? Not yet. Let her dig deeper. When she thinks she's winning, we'll spring it. I looked out the window at the bridge, glowing gold under the rising Sunday. Every beam, every bolt, every scar told a story of endurance. Victoria thought she was waging a property dispute. She didn't realize she'd just stepped into a war of documentation, and I'd been trained my whole life to win those. As I closed the blinds, a calm certainty settled over me. This wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about justice measured not in fury but in precision, and by the time the dust cleared, the only thing collapsing would be her empire, not my bridge. The morning after the sabotage attempt, I stood at the edge of the creek with a cup of black coffee, watching the mist rise over the bridge. The oak beams gleamed with dew, still solid, still defiant. The idea that Victoria had sent her people in the dead of night to cripple it ignited something deep in me, not rage, not fear, but focus. In the Army Corps, we learned that when your opponent escalates, it means they're afraid. They only strike in the dark when they're losing daylight. I called Dr. Rodriguez first. I need a second inspection, I told her. This time with full documentation, video sensors, and time-stamped results. She didn't hesitate. Send me the coordinates. I'll be there by noon. While waiting, I drove to the courthouse again, that dusty maze of archives and forgotten records. Mrs. Henderson looked up from her desk and smiled when she saw me. Back so soon, Mr. Waverly, I need everything you've got on property easements near Willow Creek, I said. Especially the original water rights documents. Her expression brightened. Oh, that's a rare one. She disappeared into the back room and returned with another ledger so old it smelled like smoke and rain. Careful with this. It's from 1919. I spread it open carefully, and what I saw sent a chill through me. My great-grandfather hadn't just built the bridge, he had filed for riparian rights, granting the Waverly family ownership of the waterway itself and all structures built to access it. In simple terms, the creek, its banks, and the bridge belonged exclusively to my family. That meant the HOA wasn't just trespassing, they were illegally operating across private waters. Mrs. Henderson peered over her glasses. Most folks don't realize those old claims still hold legal weight. But under state law, riparian rights can't be overridden by subdivision easements. I took photos of every page, every signature, every seal. You just handed me dynamite, I said. She laughed softly. No, son. Your grandfather did. I'm just the messenger. When I got home, Dr. Rodriguez was already there, her team unpacking tripods, sensors, and a laptop rigged for live analysis. They worked like clockwork, placing reflective markers, running laser scanners, attaching accelerometers along the support beams. By afternoon, the data was clear, the structure was sound. The only damage came from recent mechanical tampering, deliberate sabotage, she concluded, handing me her report. And whoever drilled those holes knew what they were doing. These aren't random. I uploaded the photos from my night vision camera, clear shots of two men, one with a Hale Construction logo on his jacket. Dr. Rodriguez whistled. That's your smoking gun. We both knew what came next. Evidence meant leverage, and leverage meant control. That evening, I gathered my allies, Jim, the lawyer, Mrs. Henderson, the archivist, Dr. Rodriguez, and Elizabeth Morrison, a local historian who'd volunteered after reading about my case. We met at my workshop, a converted barn that smelled of sawdust and determination. I unrolled the 1919 map on the table. This is the key, I said. My great-grandfather's riparian claim predates every subdivision around here. That means the HOA never had jurisdiction. Every action they've taken, every fine, every route approval, every truck is illegal. Jim leaned forward, adjusting his glasses. Then we don't just have a defense, we have an offense. We can file a quiet title action to clarify ownership and demand a full audit of the HOA's financial dealings. Exactly, I said. And when the audit shows she's been routing construction contracts through her own company, it's game over. Mrs. Henderson chuckled softly. I haven't seen this kind of teamwork since the war bond committees in the 40s. We spent the next 2 weeks gathering everything, meeting minutes, invoices, bank statements, construction permits. Each document revealed another crack in Victoria's empire. Her company had billed the HOA for infrastructure projects totaling nearly $1.2 million over 3 years, yet none of those projects existed. She's been laundering HOA funds, Jim said flatly, and using your bridge as cover for her fake safety improvements. That night I didn't sleep. I sat by the creek listening to the water, feeling the weight of generations on my shoulders. My great-grandfather had built this bridge with sweat and honor. I was about to defend it with paperwork and patience, but the principle was the same: hold your ground. A soft voice interrupted my thoughts. "You're still up," Linda stepped out onto the porch, robe pulled tight against the chill. "Couldn't sleep," I admitted. She came closer, resting her hand on my arm. "You're doing the right thing. Just don't lose yourself to it." I smiled faintly. "I won't. But I'm not backing down either." The next morning, the HOA called an emergency meeting, no doubt orchestrated by Victoria. The notice slid under my door, read mandatory attendance for all residents. Subject community safety crisis. I showed up early. The community center buzzed with nervous chatter. People whispered as I walked in, some avoiding eye contact, others nodding apologetically. At the front, Victoria stood beside a projector, her hair flawless, her expression smug. "Good evening, neighbors," she began, her tone smooth as silk. "We face a serious safety threat endangering our property values. Mr. Waverly's antique bridge, though charming, is a liability. As your president, I've taken decisive action to protect our community." Her slideshow clicked to a photo of my bridge, zoomed in on the drilled holes she'd ordered. "This structure is moments from collapse," she declared dramatically. "For everyone's safety, we're proceeding with emergency removal effective immediately," the crowd murmured. Some nodded nervously. Others looked uneasy. I waited until she finished her speech, then stood slowly. "Madam President, may I respond?" She smiled condescendingly. "This isn't a courtroom, Mr. Waverly." "Good," I said, "because I brought evidence, not arguments." I walked to the front, plugged in my laptop, and projected Dr. Rodriguez's report onto the screen. Photos, data charts, and timestamps filled the room. "Independent engineering analysis," I said, "performed last week. Conclusion: no structural instability, only deliberate tampering." A wave of whispers rippled through the audience. Victoria's mask slipped for half a second. "Those photos are doctored." "Then perhaps you can explain why your company logo appears on the jacket of one of the men caught drilling those holes." I tapped the spacebar, revealing the infrared still from my security camera. Gasps filled the hall. Her voice trembled just slightly. You're violating privacy laws." I smiled. "Funny, that's exactly what your fake inspectors said when they trespassed at 2:00 a.m. Jim stepped forward, holding a folder. "For the record," he said, "we've filed a quiet title claim and submitted evidence of financial misconduct to the state attorney's office." The silence that followed was suffocating. Even the hum of the fluorescent lights seemed to stop. Then, from the back of the room, a neighbor stood up. "Is it true, Victoria? Did you use HOA money for your company?" she stammered. "That's ridiculous. These accusations are baseless." "Then open the books," another resident shouted. When she didn't respond, the crowd turned. The queen of the cul-de-sac was suddenly alone on her throne. I didn't gloat. I didn't need to. The truth was doing the work for me. As the meeting dissolved into chaos, I slipped outside. The night air was cool, the creek whispering beneath the bridge like an old friend. I leaned on the railing, the same one my great-grandfather had, sanded smooth a century ago, and finally allowed myself to breathe. The war wasn't over, but for the first time it felt like victory was possible. And I had a feeling Victoria was about to make the mistake of her life. I didn't have to wait long for Victoria's next move. When tyrants lose control, they don't surrender, they double down. 3 days after the HOA meeting collapsed into chaos, I received 3 thick envelopes by certified mail. Each one had the same return address, Hale and Associates Legal. The first accused me of defamation for publicly maligning the HOA president. The second alleged that my bridge was a public safety hazard violating county environmental standards. The third a cease and desist letter threatening me with $250 0 inches damages if I continued obstructing approved infrastructure development. I almost laughed. Victoria wasn't trying to win in court, she was trying to bury me in paper. Jim came by that afternoon, flipped through the letters, and smirked. "Classic intimidation tactics," he said. "You know what this means, right? She's desperate." "Exactly. But desperate people are unpredictable. We need to tighten the net." So we formed what Jim jokingly called the Waverly War Council. Our little alliance met every evening in my workshop, surrounded by maps, files, and coffee cups. There was Jim with his legal brain, Dr. Rodriguez providing the engineering ammunition, Elizabeth Morrison digging through historic registries and misses, Henderson feeding us records older than most of the town itself. "Victoria's power comes from illusion," Jim said one night, pointing at the HOA organizational chart pinned to my wall. "She projects authority people obey because they think she has jurisdiction. The moment we prove otherwise, her entire structure collapses." I nodded. "Then we hit her where it hurts the law and the money." The first strike was legal. Jim filed a quiet title action, confirming exclusive Waverly ownership of Willow Creek, its riparian rights, and the bridge itself. Alongside it, we filed a petition for an injunction preventing any further HOA interference. The second strike was public. Elizabeth reached out to a local history magazine, Heritage and Hearth, which loved human interest stories about preservation battles. Within a week, they published an article titled, "Century-Old Bridge Faces, HOA Threats." The headline photo showed me standing on the railing with the morning sun behind me, captioned "Engineer Fights to Protect Ancestral Landmark." The story went viral. Within 48 hours, social media exploded with hashtags like #SaveTheWaverly Bridge and #StopHoAbuse. Residents from other states began sharing their own stories of bullying homeowners associations. Someone even started a GoFundMe for legal expenses. I didn't ask for it, but seeing strangers rally around an old wooden bridge nearly brought me to tears. The pressure was working. Victoria's once loyal board members began distancing themselves. One even emailed me anonymously. "She's panicking. She's planning something big before the injunction lands. Be careful." He wasn't exaggerating. 2 nights later, around 1:00 p.m., my motion sensors pinged again. I checked the live feed, no intruders this time, just something stranger. A small team of construction workers unloading floodlights and equipment across the creek. They were setting up survey stakes, bright orange markers running straight through my property line. I threw on a jacket and stormed out with my flashlight. "Hey, this is private property," a foreman looked up startled. "County orders, sir. Emergency environmental inspection. Show me the paperwork." He hesitated, then produced a laminated sheet stamped with an official-looking seal, but the font spacing was wrong. The county name was misspelled Willowbrook instead of Willowbrook. I smiled grimly. "Tell whoever printed that to invest in a spell checker. Pack it up. You're trespassing." They left quickly, mumbling excuses about miscommunication. But I knew exactly what it was, another forged order from Victoria's printer of lies. Jim's voice crackled over the phone when I told him. "She's accelerating," he said. "She knows the injunction's coming. She's trying to create a crisis before the hammer drops. Then we create our own." The next morning, our group met again in the workshop. I unrolled a new map one Mrs. Henderson had dug up from the county archives. It showed not just property lines, but also planned developments filed years ago by a company called Kensington Development Corporation. "Recognize that name?" I asked. Dr. Rodriguez frowned. "Kensington, Hale's maiden name, right?" "Exactly. She filed plans for a luxury condo complex 6 months before she even moved here. And look," I pointed to the highlighted parcel numbers. "The first proposed site sits right where my property line begins." Jim whistled low. "So that's the motive. The bridge isn't the obstacle, it's the gateway. Destroy it, and she opens access for her development." Which means I said this was never about safety. It was about profit. We spent hours constructing a timeline, emails, construction, invoices, inspection reports, campaign donations. By midnight, we had what looked like the backbone of a corruption case. Tomorrow, Jim said, we take this to the board. Not the HOA, the county board. If we expose her there, she's finished. But Victoria didn't wait for tomorrow. At dawn, Linda shook me awake. "Ethan, you need to see this." She handed me her phone. On the local news site was a headline that made my blood boil. "HOA President Accuses Local Veteran of Environmental Damage, Illegal Creek Modifications." The article quoted Victoria directly claiming, "I'd illegally altered the creek's natural flow, endangered protected species, and caused contamination from unauthorized construction materials." She'd even attached manipulated photos showing blue dye in the water, photos I recognized from her own trucks washing out near the creek weeks earlier. It was a smear campaign dressed as environmental concern. "She's trying to get the EPA involved," Linda said, her voice shaking. "If they open an investigation, I know I cut in. She's trying to turn my bridge into a federal issue." I grabbed my keys. Time to flip the script. By 1:00 a.m., our team was assembled at the county courthouse. We met with a sympathetic official named Rebecca Martinez from the State Environmental Protection Agency, a woman with sharp eyes and no patience for political games. I handed her a flash drive. "Everything you need: truck footage, falsified, reports, proof of forged county documents." She plugged it in, skimmed the files, and whistled. "You weren't kidding. This is serious fraud, forgery, misuse of public authority." She looked up. "Mr. Waverly, this could bring criminal charges." "That's the idea," I said. By sunset, Victoria's web of lies began to unravel. The county suspended all HOA authorized permits pending review. Her construction company's accounts were flagged for audit. And word leaked that the state had opened an official investigation into falsified environmental documents. That evening, I stood on the bridge with Jim and Doctor, Rodriguez watching the orange sky fade over Willow Creek. She's not done yet, Jim warned. Cornered people lash out. I'm counting on it, I said. The more desperate she gets, the easier it'll be to prove intent. The water below shimmered in the fading light, flowing quietly, patiently, just like justice itself. For the first time in months, I felt hope. The bridge had survived storms, sabotage, and lies. So had I. But I knew Victoria wasn't going to fade into silence. Not her. Somewhere out there, she was already plotting her next move. And this time she wouldn't settle for paperwork, she'd bring destruction in person. The calm lasted less than a week. Every war has a breaking point, and I could feel mine approaching like thunder rolling in from beyond the hills. I just didn't know how loud it would get. It started on a Tuesday morning. Linda was sitting at the kitchen table reading the local paper when her phone buzzed. I'll never forget the look on her face as she stared at the screen. "Ethan," she whispered. She called my boss. I set my coffee down. "Who, Victoria?" Linda's hands were trembling. She went to the bank. Told them my husband was under federal investigation for environmental crimes. She said the board should review my position in case there's financial impropriety. My stomach turned cold. "She's threatening your job." Linda nodded, eyes brimming with tears. 15 years, Ethan. I've never even been late on a report. She's dragging my name into this. I walked outside to the porch, fists clenched so tight my knuckles went white. She'd crossed the line from corruption to personal warfare. And when people like Victoria cross that line, they don't just want to win, they want to ruin you. That afternoon I called Jim. "She's going after Linda's employment. You think that's coincidence?" He sighed heavily. "No. She's baiting you. Trying to make you lash out so she can paint you as unstable. But it also means she's running out of legal ammunition." "I'm not lashing out," I said. "I'm documenting everything." "Good. Because we're going to need every piece of it." By Friday, the retaliation escalated again. Anonymous blog posts popped up claiming I had PTSD, that I was unstable and dangerous. Someone even sent a letter to the local paper suggesting my bridge was being used for illegal dumping. Linda begged me to let it go, at least for the weekend. "Please, Ethan. Let's just drive out to the lake, take a break." I almost agreed until the roar of diesel engines shattered the quiet. 3 cement trucks, bright orange under the noon sun, rolled down the road toward my property. Their tires sprayed gravel, their engines bellowing like beasts. I ran to the driveway and waved my arms. "Turn those rigs around. This is private property." The lead driver leaned out his window. "Sorry, sir." "County order. Emergency demolition scheduled for today." My blood froze. "Who authorized it?" He shrugged. "Got the paperwork right here." I took it from him and nearly laughed in disbelief. The letterhead bore the County Safety Division's seal, but the signatures were fake. I'd seen that exact signature slightly crooked with a smudged ink trail on one of Victoria's previous forged permits. "Turn those trucks around," I said firmly. "You've been lied to. That order's a fake." The driver frowned, uncertain. "Ma'am told us it was urgent." "Yeah," I said, stepping closer, "and that ma'am is about to get arrested." I called Jim first, then the sheriff's department, then the local news desk at Channel 7. "If you want a story about HOA corruption in real time," I told the reporter, "you'll want to bring your cameras to Willow Creek." Now, while I waited, I checked my trail cameras. One of them had already caught something, Victoria's black Mercedes parked 2 blocks away, angled perfectly toward my bridge. Her silhouette was unmistakable watching through binoculars, sipping her coffee like she was spectating a show she'd already planned the ending for. But this time the ending wasn't hers. When the sheriff's cruisers pulled up 15 minutes later, I met them at the gate, paperwork in hand. "You might want to stop those trucks before they commit a felony," I said. Deputy Rodriguez, a no-nonsense woman with mirrored sunglasses, took one glance at the forged documents and raised an eyebrow. "This seal's wrong. County seal doesn't have a gold border. Who issued this HOA president, Victoria Hale?" I said. "She's right up the road watching from her car." Rodriguez turned to her partner. "Get her." As they approached, I heard shouting, Victoria's voice sharp and frantic. "You can't stop this. That bridge is collapsing. I have emergency authority." Rodriguez's calm reply carried across the water. "Ma'am, you have forged county paperwork. Step out of the vehicle." The news van arrived just in time to capture the moment. The camera light flicked on, catching Victoria's perfectly styled hair glinting like a helmet of arrogance. She tried to hide her face with a folder marked HOA Confidential, but the deputy was already handcuffing her. "You're making a mistake," she hissed. "I was protecting public safety." Rodriguez didn't flinch. "Public safety doesn't involve forged signatures and private demolition crews." I didn't cheer, I didn't gloat. I just exhaled for the first time in what felt like months. The trucks idled uncertainly, their drivers, looking from one another to the flashing blue lights. "Shut them down," I told Rodriguez quietly. "They're innocent." She's the one who paid them. As the engines died, a silence fell over Willow Creek, a silence filled with the chirping of cicadas and the hum of camera equipment. The Channel 7 reporter crossed the lawn, microphone in hand. "Mr. Waverly," she said, her voice live on air. "Viewers are calling this the most shocking HOA scandal our county has seen. Do you have anything you'd like to say to your neighbors or to Mrs. Hale?" I looked straight into the lens. "Yeah," I said evenly. "Bridges don't break people, greed does. And when someone tries to destroy your history for profit, make sure they trip over their own lies first." The clip aired that night, and by morning it had gone viral. Comments poured in from across the country, veterans, homeowners, even lawyers offering pro bono assistance. Number Waverly vs. HOA started trending. But victory tasted bittersweet. I knew Victoria wouldn't stay quiet. That woman had a survival instinct sharper than a cornered fox. Sure enough, by the end of the week, she'd posted bail and was back home angrier, humiliated, and unpredictable. Jim called with a warning. "She's losing everything, her job, her company, her reputation. That makes her dangerous." I stared out at the bridge, glowing under the afternoon Sunday. "Then she'll make her final move soon." He sighed. "Be ready for anything." 2 nights later, I got the call. Jim's voice was tense. "Ethan, you need to get down to the bridge now." "What happened?" "Someone's moving heavy equipment out there. Floodlights. Looks like another demolition crew, but this time she's not hiding it." I grabbed my flashlight and ran, heart pounding against my ribs. The air was thick with humidity and the low rumble of engines. As I reached the edge of the property, I saw an excavator parked halfway across the bridge, floodlights illuminating the water below. Workers moved frantically, guided by a single voice shouting orders, Victoria's. She was really doing it. I stepped forward, adrenaline spiking, the flashlight beams slicing through the mist. "Victoria," I shouted. "You're trespassing. Shut it down before someone gets hurt." She turned toward me, eyes wild, her immaculate blazer soaked with sweat. "You don't understand. This bridge is a hazard. I'm saving the community." "No," I said, my voice steady. "You're trying to erase your evidence." The excavator's claw lifted, creaking as it swung over the oak railing. Sparks flew when it scraped the steel reinforcements I'd installed weeks earlier. The machine stopped mid-swing, the operator startled by the clang. "What the hell?" he shouted. "There's metal in this thing. Keep going," Victoria screamed. "Tear it down." But then came the wail of sirens. Deputy Rodriguez's cruiser roared onto the scene, lights strobing across the water. Behind her came another, then another, and finally the Channel 7 van again, cameras already rolling. Victoria froze like a spotlighted animal. The excavator's engine sputtered to silence. Rodriguez stepped out, hand on her holster. "Ma'am, step away from the equipment." Victoria's voice broke. "You don't understand. He's lying." Rodriguez cut her off. "Ma'am, we have video footage, forged permits, and eyewitnesses. You're done." As the deputies cuffed her again, the crowd that had gathered along the creek started applauding. The noise echoed over the water like a promise finally kept. I stood there breathless under the glare of the floodlights, watching as they led her away. The bridge stood untouched, scarred but unbroken. For the first time in months, I realized it wasn't just a structure I'd saved. It was everything it stood for. The sun rose the next morning over a different kind of silence, the kind that feels like aftermath. The sirens were gone, the cameras packed up, and the bridge stood there in the soft orange light, proud and quiet as ever. But inside me, everything still hummed with adrenaline. I hadn't slept. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Victoria's face under those floodlights, makeup-streaked hair, disheveled, screaming at deputies as they cuffed her for the second time. For months, she'd made me the villain. Last night, the whole county saw the truth. Jim called just after dawn. "Congratulations, my friend," he said, voice hoarse with exhaustion. "You just made every HOA attorney in the state lose sleep." I managed a tired laugh. "She's actually in jail this time, processing as we speak. The sheriff's office confirmed she's facing multiple charges: fraud, forgery, attempted destruction of property, environmental interference. But brace yourself. Her lawyers are already filing motions. She'll be out on bail within 24 hours. Then we make sure there's nothing left for her to manipulate when she walks out." That day became a marathon of damage control. Jim coordinated with county officials, Dr. Rodriguez finalized her official structural report, and Mrs. Henderson prepared sworn statements authenticating every historic document we'd uncovered. Meanwhile, Channel 7's footage aired nationally. The headline read, "HOA President Caught Ordering Illegal Demolition Caught on Camera." The clip showed everything: the forged permits, the excavators failed, strike the confrontation, and finally Victoria's arrest. The image of her screaming as deputies led her away became instant internet fodder. Memes exploded across social media. Karen versus the bridge, guess who broke first? By noon, the pressure was spreading. The County Board of Supervisors announced an emergency session to review HOA oversight and potential misuse of authority. It was the first time in decades such a session had been called. Jim grinned when he read the statement. That's it, she's radioactive now. Nobody in government's going to touch her. But my satisfaction was tempered by fatigue and by something heavier. Revenge had never been my goal. Justice was. And now that justice was in motion, I felt the emptiness that comes when the fight begins to end. Still, I had work to do. The next morning, the town hall filled to capacity. I'd been invited to speak, though it was less a meeting and more a public reckoning. County officials, reporters, neighbors, all packed shoulder to shoulder. Some looked embarrassed, others determined. Patricia Walsh, now acting HOA president after Victoria's arrest, opened the meeting with a trembling voice. Tonight we're here to address the truth about what's been happening in our community. Mr. Waverly, you have the floor. I walked to the front, laptop under my arm. For months I'd stood in this same room as an accused man. Tonight I stood as witness. Thank you, I said, scanning the crowd. Some of you know me. Some of you only know the version of me that was spread in HOA. Newsletters unstable, stubborn, reckless. But the truth isn't complicated. I connected the projector, and the first slide appeared a copy of my great-grandfather's 1919 survey, the ink faded but legible. This bridge was built before any of this existed. Before there was an HOA, before there were property covenants, before there was even a paved road here. My family's rights to this land and the creek are older than the subdivision you live in. Click. The next slide showed the night vision footage of the sabotage, the two men with drills, the Hale Construction logo visible under infrared light. Gasps filled the hall. Every bolt they loosened, every beam they drilled into was a crime, I continued. They tried to destroy history and call it progress. But bridges don't fall easily, especially not ones built on truth. The third slide was Dr. Rodriguez's engineering report stamped and signed. Then came the financial statements Jim had compiled showing HOA funds funneled into Victoria's company. And finally, the viral footage of her arrest. By the time the video ended, the silence in the hall was suffocating. Patricia rose from her seat, her face pale but resolute. On behalf of the HOA board, she said slowly, I want to apologize to Mr. Waverly and to every resident who was misled. Effective immediately, we're dissolving the current board pending legal review. All financial records will be submitted to the county auditor. A murmur spread through the room, relief, anger, disbelief, all mixing together. Then County Attorney Michael Torres stepped forward. I'd also like to make an announcement, he said. The state's investigation has confirmed that Mr. Waverly's family holds exclusive riparian rights to Willow Creek. All HOA covenants claiming authority over that property are null and void. Furthermore, the forged documents constitute criminal offenses under state and federal law. You could feel the tension drain from the crowd. One man started clapping, hesitant at first, then others joined in. Within seconds, the entire room was on its feet. I just stood there, stunned. Jim leaned over and whispered, "That's the sound of vindication, Ethan. Savor it." But I didn't smile. I thought about the months of fear, the sleepless nights, the humiliation Linda had endured. Vindication was cold comfort for what we'd lost. Still, it was something solid, like the bridge itself. After the meeting, people I hadn't spoken to in months came up to shake my hand. Some apologized. Some just said thank you. Patricia even hugged Linda, her voice breaking as she said, "We should have listened sooner." Outside, under the fading light, the press swarmed again. A young reporter asked me, "What's next for you, Mr. Waverly? What happens now?" I looked past her camera toward the bridge, glowing faintly under the streetlights. "Now," I said, "now we rebuild properly this time." The next few months blurred into motion. The HOA was disbanded and replaced by a voluntary neighborhood association. The county launched formal charges against Victoria, her brother-in-law, and several contractors. And under the guidance of Dr. Rodriguez and Elizabeth, the Waverly Bridge was officially added to the State Register of Historic Landmarks. The day the bronze plaque was installed, I stood there with Linda and Emily, my daughter who is now pregnant with her first child. "Your great-great-grandfather built this with his hands," I told her, resting mine on the weathered railing. "He built it to last. And we almost lost it because someone forgot what real value looks like." Emily smiled softly. "We didn't lose it, Dad. You saved it." I shook my head. We all did. I just happened to be stubborn enough to stand in the way. Behind us, the creek shimmered in the afternoon Sunday, It was peaceful again, no trucks, no diesel fumes, no shouting, just water and wind and memory. As I watched the current flow beneath the beams, I thought about what Dr. Rodriguez had said when she first inspected the bridge. Whoever built this made it to outlive storms. Maybe that's what we all are, I thought. Bridges. Tested, weathered, sometimes cracked, but still standing. And as the breeze carried the scent of honeysuckle through the air, I finally allowed myself to breathe, knowing that the real work, healing, rebuilding trust, and restoring faith was just beginning. 6 months later, Willow Creek looked like a different place. The noise, the tension, the constant hum of conflict, all gone. In its place came a strange kind of quiet that only exists after a storm. The bridge stood where it always had, weathered but resolute, its new bronze landmark plaque catching the morning light like a medal earned in battle. People stopped by to take photos, families brought their kids to see the bridge that beat the HOA. It felt surreal. I'd spent the past few months rebuilding my life piece by piece. The legal chaos had ended in what the newspapers called the most significant HOA corruption conviction in state history. Victoria Kensington Hale, once the queen of suburban order, was now inmate #44756 at the county detention center, awaiting transfer to federal custody. Her brother-in-law lost his inspector's license, and several board members took plea deals to avoid jail. The court ordered restitution. Every stolen HOA dollar was to be returned to the residents, every fraudulent fine refunded. But victory came with its own weight. Some nights I'd stand on the porch staring at the creek, wondering how much of myself I'd burned in that fight. Justice doesn't come free, it costs sleep, trust, and sometimes the simplicity of who you were before it all began. Linda joined me one evening holding 2 mugs of tea. "You're thinking about her again, aren't you?" I nodded. "Not her exactly, just how far people go when they start believing they own everything around them." She smiled gently. "And how far you went to stop it." I chuckled. "Guess stubbornness runs in the family." The next morning, a letter arrived in an official envelope from the governor's office. I opened it carefully. Inside was a formal certificate. The state of North Carolina recognizes the Waverly Bridge as a historic heritage site of cultural significance. It was signed, sealed, and dated. Below that, a personal note, Mr. 70N. Waverly, your story reminds us that preservation is not just about wood and stone, it's about people who refuse to be erased. I pinned the letter above my workbench. For once, the word refuse felt like praise. News of the case spread further than I'd ever expected. Documentaries, podcasts, HOA reform groups all wanted interviews. Jim handled most of them, but every so often I'd agree to one myself. Not to boast, but to warn. HOAs are supposed to protect communities, I told one reporter. But when power concentrates in the wrong hands, it turns neighbors into enemies. Paperwork becomes weaponry, and the only defense is knowledge. The message caught on. People started calling it the Waverly Principle, know your deeds before you sign your rights. It turned into a movement. Homeowners from across the country began contacting me, some asking advice, others just wanting to say thank you. I tried to answer every email. One afternoon, I received a message from a young man in Arizona. His HOA was trying to seize his grandfather's windmill under aesthetic regulations. He wrote, "I watched your story. You gave me courage to fight back." I smiled. That was worth more than any court victory. Meanwhile, the bridge became something bigger than I ever imagined. State University announced a scholarship in my family's name, the Heritage Bridge Fellowship, for engineering students specializing in historical preservation. Dr. Rodriguez called to tell me the first recipient, a student named Maria Santos, was using her research grant to develop eco-friendly restoration techniques for wooden bridges. She says your story made her change her thesis. Dr. Rodriguez said, "From modernizing infrastructure to protecting what still works." I laughed softly. Guess not all bridges are meant to be replaced. Elizabeth the historian started hosting an annual Bridge Day festival. The first one drew hundreds. Local artisans set up booths, kids painted little model bridges, and a folk band played on the bank while volunteers cleaned the creek. For the first time, the neighborhood felt like a community again, not a battlefield. During the festival, Patricia Walsh, the woman who'd taken over the HOA after Victoria's fall, pulled me aside. "Ethan," she said, "I want to thank you. You didn't just save this bridge, you saved all of us from forgetting what accountability looks like. Just promise me one thing," I told her. "Never let another HOA president forget who they work for." She smiled. "Not on my watch." As months passed, the ripple effects of the case kept spreading. The state legislature passed a reform bill requiring financial transparency for all HOAs, every fee, every fine, every dollar traceable by residents. They named it the Waverly Act. I didn't ask for that honor, but when I saw the governor sign it on live television, I felt a strange mix of pride and disbelief. Even my daughter Emily got involved. After giving birth to my grandson, she joined a nonprofit that educates homeowners about property rights. She sent me photos of workshops where young couples learned how to read land surveys, things my great-grandfather would have approved of. Life felt balanced again. The scars were still there, but so was the strength that came from them. One evening, months after the dust had settled, I took my grandson, little Henry, to the bridge. He was barely 4, all curiosity and laughter. I set him down on the railing, holding his tiny hands. "See that, buddy?" I said, pointing to the beams. "Your great-great-great-grandfather built this with his own hands. It survived floods, fires, and even people who tried to destroy it. You know why?" He tilted his head. "Because it's strong, because it's cared for," I said. "Things last when people take care of them." He nodded solemnly, the way only a child can when they think they've learned something important. Then he smiled. "Can we come back tomorrow, every day you want?" I said. As the sun dipped behind the trees, the bridge cast a long golden shadow across the water, an unbroken line from past to present. The honeysuckle was blooming again, and the air smelled sweet and clean. Standing there with Henry, I realized the real victory wasn't the trial or the headlines or even the new laws. It was this, the return of piece of legacy of knowing the next generation wouldn't have to fight this same battle. Victoria had tried to erase a century of family history. Instead, she gave it immortality. Before we left, Henry looked up at me and said, "Grandpa, can I build a bridge one day too?" I smiled, eyes stinging with something between pride and memory. "You can build anything you want," I told him. "Just make sure it stands for something." And as we walked home, the creek whispering behind us, I felt the story finally come full circle, a bridge built to last not just through storms but through time.